see in the Western art, Renaissance times and so on. But again, it's a question of, well, yes, but these elements were not invented in the Byzantine times. So like it's just a matter of interpretation. I think it can be interpreted that way, but my point is just that we shouldn't canonize these stylistic properties. They have their place, but like why should we expect from everybody now to paint it that way? I think it will produce, as it produces in Orthodox countries, these lifeless images, paintings. I mean, when you enter the church, sometimes you look very monstrous, and like because you see there is lack of life. There is something. I mean, it's not an authentic experience of these guys who paint them. I mean, it's something. It was an authentic experience of persons, like 500 or 700 years ago, and like just like taking automatically one style and trying to imitate it today. I don't think it's a good idea. The question is, what should we do? That's another question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a question related to what you're talking about in terms of love and boundaries, and especially so in wanting to expand the boundaries on what can count as Christian art, and in thinking about love as the overcoming of all boundaries. I'm wondering if the doctrine of creation or something might point somebody to saying that all art is Christian, or if it's possible to conceive in some ways of art that isn't Christian, or can there be any boundaries, or do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's this question is related to the question I intentionally avoided in my presentation, which is boundaries of the church. So in a same way, you could say, is there anything on earth that doesn't belong to the church? In a certain sense, yes. In a certain sense, no. And it's the way. I mean, the way we define church. I mean, if the church, and there are many different ways to say what church is. I mean, one of the most obvious one is to say, okay, well, the church is a communion of concrete, community and communion of concrete persons, gather on the liturgy, celebrating Eucharist and so on, with their bishop and so on. But there are also other meaning of the word church, like the whole creation, God's creation, and God is a church. Even Christ is a manifestation of church as a communion of two natures. Even God is church as communion of three divine persons. So in this sense, the question is like, what do we in concrete context define as church? And I think the same is with church or Christian art. I think we can find some elements if we want in each possible expression, as we can find image of God in each human being and God's creation everywhere. But the question is like, is there any more precise, more meaningful way to speak about Christian art? And it's a kind of hard issue because we can't reduce it. Obviously, we can't reduce it only to motifs and say if there are Christian motifs, it's automatically Christian art. So for many reasons. I mean, would Nietzsche be an example of Christian art? So like if we reduce it only to these motifs that are represented. And on the other hand, you have a lot of Christian artists who are really like Christians and who want to make some Christian art that use abstract forms. So like what to do with it? Is it something that you can just like that, reject and say, okay, there are no Christian motifs, so it does not belong to the church and Christianity? I don't think so. I think it belongs in many ways to the church, and in many ways it is an expression of the church. And I remember one story from one spiritual father in Serbia, an Orthodox guy, priest, who had a spiritual child who was a painter, and then when she like moved to the church and baptized and so on, she started painting items, of course. And she was a painter before, but then she just reduced all her kind of work painting items. And then he said, because like, she became Orthodox and very religious and so on, and this guy said like, what are you doing? Like, forget about it, stop painting items. You know, like paint what you normally paint. You know, because even this will belong to the church. Because you can't be, you know, like as a person in the church and as an artist outside the church. So like there is no way to play this game. If you are in the church, so like everything you produce, natural painting is fine. It belongs to the church, right?
I'm sorry. Would you mind one follow-up?
No.
I'm actually kind of wondering the opposite way. Like I as a Christian might be able to get some inspiration or value out of an abstract piece that may speak to me theologically. But if I call it Christian art and the artist, maybe I offend the artist by saying that this is Christian, or maybe me calling that isn't perceived as love in some sense by that artist. So I'm wondering.
I don't think that there is a definite answer to that question. At least I don't know any good answer. I mean, it's a problem. It's a really problem. And I mean, you can look also, we can think of this concept of Christianizing, you know, something that is not Christian, you know, how something that is not Christian becomes Christianized, becomes something that belongs to the church. And I think it is really a complex issue, and it also we also have to consider this relation between the image, or if we speak about images or any other kinds of art, and the viewer. I mean, is it something? Is this property, this quality of being Christian art, something that is somehow objectively present in the work, or is it a matter of perception? So, like the way we look at it. I mean, there are a lot of issues that I think have to be addressed to understand that question.
Kind of as a follow-up on that. I might see in a work of art that the artist intended to be a criticism, a dismissal, or a satiric comment on Christianity. Some challenge to the church that I would see as a prophetic challenge, or, you know, a theological challenge. I wish I'm not very good about titles and names, but there's a 20th century painting with a lot of very odd figures in it, and it's some kind of a parade. And I think it's titled something like Christ's Entrance into Brussels. And in this parade, which has some kind of surreal figures around the edges, there, if you look, it's a huge but very crowded painting. If you look toward the center, very, very carefully, there's a figure on a donkey. And I think the figure even has a halo. So it's a clear reference to Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. But it's also a clear reference, much which I don't get, to the politics of the day. I can faintly make out that there's some kind of political slogans, but I don't know enough about the politics of Belgium in that era. It isn't clear to me, and I don't know, whether the artist meant it as some kind of positive statement of the responsibility of the church to be engaged in an economically and politically corrupt world, or whether the artist's message was far more sardonic and sarcastic than that. But I've seen that. I've actually seen the painting itself maybe twice, and some pictures of the painting, and I find that painting really challenging. And I had that same reaction to the